And we are live. Welcome to the Mr. Teacher, Mr. Preacher podcast YouTube channel. I'm Kevin, that's Jake, and we are here as always to learn what lasts in athletics and teach and preach those tools and tactics and tips back to you, the coach, the athlete, the parent, lots of the coaching. But that's who we're serving. That's what we're after. We're here for you. And today we are kicking off our series on alertness. So this is Pyramid of Success block number 7. We're studying John Wooden's Pyramid of Success. This is number 7, Jake. I cannot believe we're already on number 7, no matter if you're listening earlier or later. And we are on alertness. So alertness is what we're going to be checking out. We will define that. And then we will be digging into our first book about the unconscious, Subliminal by, I'm going to try and get it right, Leonard Mlodinow. And we'll start from the inside out, as it were, through this series, the unconscious to the conscious, to actually applying it to situational awareness and ending with some poker. But that's where we're going. How are you doing? It's good to see you as we go.
I'm doing good. Things are wonderful. I'm excited to get into this. I spent some time studying marketing in my college years, so the unconscious or how to trigger people's minds without them even realizing it is something that I've definitely looked at a little bit. I find super interesting, and with a little alarming maybe at some points, but pretty cool science, and I'm interested to see how it can play out in our coaching and in our athletic endeavors. So yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Me too. It's like I just can't imagine how many people at any level of sport, young to old, college to pro, whatever, are operating at an unconscious level, or even aware that the things they do operate on an unconscious level. So I'm kind of curious to see how we might move the needle from accidental to intentional. Maybe I should go this way, left to right, right to left, and see. But would you bless the episode for us, sir? And we will dig into the summary and the terminology of subliminal.
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity to chat again, chat with Kevin, chat with our audience. And I pray that you would bless our time, that the words that we say would be edifying, that they would be interesting, that they would ask the right questions, and dig into the amazing brains that you created, the amazing worlds that you have created, and that we would enjoy our time and be full of smiles, laughs, and really cool information. For all these things in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. Well, let's start off with some terms. Just if you're new, you like to define things just so we're all on the same page. Seems like words need to be defined more today than ever before. So let's start off with Wooden, and we'll remind you as we go through the series. But Wooden defined alertness as constantly being aware and observing. Always seek to improve yourself and the team. So it's a lot of noticing, right? You're looking for it. He mentions a lot in his various books and where he's written about the pyramid, about Abe Lincoln. And we talked about Abe Lincoln before this, the idea of you can learn a lot of what not to do from others, right? You can see, best practice and least recommended practice. And I think that as we study this, we're going to be able to practice that art of noticing, going underneath the hood unconsciously, coming into the present moment and being more mindful of what is right in front of us so that we can respond accordingly. So this one has been very different for leading up to the other 6. The other 6 I can very much get around, but alertness at this spot was interesting. So I want to start off with Subliminal by Leonard Mlodinow, how your unconscious mind rules your behavior. What does subliminal mean? And what's the promise of the book? So the book goes into 2 parts, the 2-tiered brain, part 1, and then he has the 5 sections that go along with the unconscious, at least in his purview. So he really breaks that down for us and makes it very, very simple. But in the beginning of the book, he defines it. So subliminal, what is it? It translates, the Latin root of subliminal translates to below threshold. Psychologists employ the term to mean below the threshold of your consciousness, so you're not aware of it. This book is about the subliminal effects of that broad sense, about the processes of the unconscious mind and how they influence us. So first off, that's super interesting. I mean, I know Wooden didn't cover the unconscious, But the idea that we can be alert to these things, not only in ourselves, but how we deliver even from the other teams, like, oh, that's cool. So he goes on to say this is often invisible to us, and the meanings we attach to them. Our ability to make quick judgment calls and decisions that can sometimes mean the difference between life and death, I would say wins and losses, and the actions we engage in as a result. So this is the new science of the unconscious as when the book was written. Continuing onward, the promise of the book is this, is if you really want to understand the social world, if you really want to understand yourself and others, and beyond that, if you really want to overcome many of the obstacles that prevent you from living your fullest, richest life, you need to understand the influence of the subliminal world that is hidden within each of us. So this is really next level thinking in its entirety. The last couple things I want to add here are just some synonyms, just so we're aware. And I will get butchered by the psychologists out there, but subliminal would also deal with, I just want to build a little schema, is deal with things like the unconscious, right? So we have conscious, unconscious. We're just going to use those synonymously. More specific terms like automatic. So if you've heard of the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, implicit or uncontrolled. So let those words sit with you, not saying that you can't learn to control these, depending how much of a fan you are of Tony Robbins and NLP. But the metaphor that he used here was very helpful. He says, you can tell a lot about a restaurant's recipes by sitting at a table and sampling the food. But to really know what is going on, you have to look in the kitchen. And the human brain remain hidden behind the closed doors of the skull, its inner workings virtually and as inaccessible as they had been the centuries earlier, until we got fMRI and stuff. The last thing I want to say, Jake, before you kick us off is this portion. So right before we get into the socially unconscious. So what we've learned, here's what we've learned. This is kind of the big topic sentence of the subjects of the book, and we'll pick the ones we want. What we've learned is that much of our social perception, so what we see consciously, like our vision, hearing, and memory, so our senses, appears to proceed along pathways that are not associated with awareness, intention, or conscious effort. How this subliminal programming affects our lives, the way we present ourselves, so, you know, jerseys, our haircuts, things like that, the way we communicate with and judge people, that's a big deal. And the way we react to social situations, you win, you lose, somebody fails. And the way we think of ourselves is the territory this book explores. So that was my very humble pitch of why the subconscious matters and why we even selected the book. Any thoughts on the just general subconscious from your experience before we dive into our topics?
Yeah, I'd actually start with a question. When you were an athlete, how much of what you did you consciously do? You understand what I'm saying? So it got to the point where I would do things, and then it wasn't until after the fact that it would occur to me what I did. Like everything would just go into autopilot. Just boom, it happened. Do you ever recall that kind of situation or awareness?
I don't know. I was so in my head that it was very hard to get out of my head. That's probably why I like the Warrior Dial and Chop Wood Carry Water so much, is just the times I played best, I was just relaxed. It was Legion baseball. There was no pressure, the pleasure over pressure kind of concept. I did a lot in my habits though. Like when I showed up, like the first thing I would do is this, the second thing, I liked my routines. Those I did more unconsciously. But if you're actually asking me in a game, like, oh, wow, I just did this random thing. Yeah, no, I was the hyper thinker. So I'm assuming you did. I mean, you're the soccer guy.
Yeah, I would. It was, especially the more I played, I would even make decisions, not on a conscious level, if that makes sense. I wouldn't, like, there are times obviously where you'd look behind you, you'd look around you, oh, that person's open, okay, when I get the ball, I'm going to pass to that person. It became so trained that it would be like ball came to you, ball left your foot, and it went right to someone else's foot. And you went, I don't remember seeing him there. I mean, it was almost freaky, but that was the right, that was the right thing to do. But I don't remember deciding that, and it would be almost like stretches of time where
Well,
I would just do things and be like, I don't remember thinking the thought to do that. Why did that happen?
yeah, well, and that's how you got to the level you got to, right? I mean, that's what we would aspire to, is you see a situation, respond, and you just allow I think there's a lot of surrender in that, allowing your body to take over. But kind of pivoting with that. So to answer your question, you gave me some space to think, was, the only times I really remember that, maybe it's because of the sports I played, football, and you just block the dude in front of you, right? There wasn't as much to think about unconsciously. Oh, I see someone coming, put an arm out, kind of thing. I don't know. Get in the way was the job. Baseball, I mean, there is a little bit of that, and like in terms of pitch sequencing, or maybe you could pick up when a guy might throw something like I'm hitting 3, they're going to throw me garbage. Or you watch, through a course of a game. And so you can kind of pick up what might happen. The one sport that I'll go to, because this is interesting, and maybe I'm jumping ahead to one of our topics, but was basketball. So I was constantly, at least on our team, always the guy that threw the ball in. So in a practice, I would observe what is the press, or I'd pass it in for the play, but I would watch that. And every once in a while I'd pass it somewhere. I just make the decision so quickly, you're not thinking. But the processing, I think what you're getting at is like processing of the information, then doing the thing that makes sense based on the pattern in front of you. Because my job was to get that sucker in and get to where it needed to go. I was probably a little more conservative than I needed to be. I hated turning the ball over. So no risk it, no biscuit. Maybe Bruce Arians would have thrown me under the bus, but we got the ball in, right? And we're in a good situation. I tended to take risks down the court on a press because there was always a hole, and I had an arm. Even though I'm short, I could throw it over to people. So, but the one that I wanted to get to, maybe, and you can cut me off if you want me to save it, is I'm a twin. And the thing I had an advantage of, at least in basketball, and it didn't always work, was I had subliminal mannerism expertise.
Yeah.
So neither my brother or I were very, very elite athletes. But I could tell where he was on the court, and I could usually read what he was thinking. Backdoor pick, slip that pick. I mean, he's open. So we had been around each other enough, even though we're not super close. And they thought it was always the twin thing. It was just because we're brothers, to be honest. Like, trying to get to that, so you're always around it. But I assume, like, if you're around a teammate enough, you have that kind of unspoken, oh yeah, do that thing, and you don't think about it, you just do it. And I think that's what you're getting at, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. You just don't have a conscious thought. It just happens. Like, it just, woo. And I mean, on the sports you've listed, right? Football is not super flowy. There's breaks all the time, right? Baseball, the same. Though with baseball, it would surprise me how conscious a hitter would be because things happen so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, you do it enough that it just time slows down, right? But like, it always amazes me that baseball players oh yeah, I read breaking ball out of his hand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the ball's not in travel very long, so for me to be able to see the ball, process what type of pitch it is, process the location of it, and then do it seems like a lot of information to consciously process.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that would be a very subconscious activity that you're doing just with overall reps. Like, you like maybe notice the twinge of a lace, and you're like, yep, that's what it is, and your body just flows into automatic pilot mode, and back goes where the ball is. Boom. And then basketball is a little bit more flowy, right?
Yep.
And then you get to soccer, which just never stops. It's just constantly going. So maybe that's what kind of triggers it. The other sports allow you to be a little bit more in your head, conscious, thinking about the specifics of what's going to happen. I just remember the more I played, the more, I just go into autopilot mode, and it would actually kind of freak me out. Like, what if all of a sudden I start making decisions that are wrong? I don't have any control for what am I going to do? It never really happened that way, but yeah, that was just as you were talking. I kind of brought up. That's what brought up to me. I wonder if other people did this, or maybe just all the concussions that were happening.
Yeah, well, and you think of like who's the guy that did free solo? Alex Honnold. So in flow, like in pattern recognition and flow is not addressed in this book for the record. So, but in flow, it's perfect decision making time after time after time. You notice a pattern, you take a small risk, and you just keep doing those, and they build. But you said they're always right, and then we always want. That's why flow is so interesting, because you train up the fundamentals and you surrender to that process, and then you allow your body to take over, which is what you're supposed to do. But like Alex Honnold, if he makes a mistake when he's free soloing a mountain, he's dying. So like that's the extreme version of perfect decision making, time after time after time. But to bring it back is really, I would assume, like over time, the more patterns you can put in. That's why veterans are interesting in sports, especially when you played against somebody more than once. Like if it's a one-off, you've never seen a guy, that's hard, right? He throws fastball. Okay, well, I've seen a fastball at 98 before. Outside corner hit. But to have that face-off. So we were watching the NCAA wrestling national championships, right? Go Penn State. They just, whoa. One particular match had the championship 1 versus 2, but these guys had faced each other 4 times this year already.
Yeah.
So that by the time you get to that, okay, I've seen this guy, and he does this, and I think that we underestimate the unconscious, and that's a good probably place to transition. So, hit me with the topic. Where are we starting?
Sounds good. Well, the first part seems to be a big focus on memory and how it works. So let's jump in with the importance of being a coach, journalist, videographer, or memory maker.
All right. I'm skipping a lot, people, so bear with us. Let's go to the key thing here. The key thing of the unconscious versus conscious, this 2-tiered brain, as Leonard Mlodinow says, is there's so much information and bits in the present moment that if we were able to actively take it on, we'd be overwhelmed. Our unconscious gives us, in our spotlight theory of attention, where we only can remember and focus on so many things at once, allows us to just get to good enough, right? We got to be able to generalize in this particular perspective. So when we talk about being the coach, being a journalist and a videographer, our memories suck. We distort them, we edit them. They talked about in here about prison lineups, where what we think what we saw and who we thought we saw isn't always the case, and why prison lineups are no longer a thing. So what we want to talk about is the athletic implications of video and memory. So what we need to know is that a testimony about an incident rather than a film of the incident of itself. Don't ever trust somebody's narrative on how did the game go, right? What did the film say? So if you're coaching, so the reason why this is interesting and overcoming memory distortions is you need the film. You need the facts. What was really there? It cannot be he said, she said, I said, coach said. It's got to be that. So this is one thing that I really wrote down. We'd never settle for such thinking in other areas of life. And he's talking about here is like a courtroom, right? Like a jury. The state of California example, I'm going to read this. For example, recommends that judges inform juries that their memories should prevail over the written transcript. The most erroneous statement I've ever heard. Memory should prevail over the written transcript. Lawyers will tell you there are practical reasons for that. For instance, that deliberations would take too long if jurors pored over the trial transcripts. But to me, that seems outrageous. We never settle for such thinking in other areas of our life. Imagine the American Medical Association telling doctors not to rely on patients' charts. Well, heart murmur? I don't remember any heart murmur. Let's take you off of that medication. So the key implication is rare to have proof of what actually happened. So in most cases, we'll never know how accurate our memories really are. And they go into Watergate, right? And like this one guy that was supposedly there and he wasn't, but he edits his entire statements that when they went back and looked at the actual video or audio recording, none of the stuff this guy said was true. He had the pretty much opposite effect. So as they're trying to, indict Nixon here. And so the psychologist went through it. So what is the point of this? So the athletic implications of our memory, our distortions, is you got to get on video. I mean, when we talk about getting into the unconscious, because what then we do is we believe the memories, those false memories that we have. So in another book, it's called Tripping Over the Truth. But when I say a coach is a journalist, videographer, you need to have the stat sheet. How many hits did you get? The stat, I mean, no, you can make numbers lie, but the scorebook, this is my notes, I don't know why I'm holding them up. The scorebook really does tell you a story. I mean, you can say, did you follow a process as a hitter and you got, followed quality at bats, but you can't rely on your memory for that. Well, how'd you hit against that one team in March 2024? You can't do that. And because I don't remember at all. But if you took me back and showed me the scorebook, oh yeah, I remember that at bat. The same thing with video. And that's why Chip and Dan Heath would just throw up, is like very rarely in athletics. And this is why coaches get paid, like in terms of like private coaches, they take video before, during, after. And since we have the technology now, we need to have the visual evidence to be able to suggest to our conscious and unconscious mind that we've made progress. You cannot rely on your memory and your feelings alone, because I will tell you from the whole first part of the book, it will fail you. Not even if it's even close. I'm not even looking for accuracy, but you will edit it by default with your own internal rationale and biases. So how does that land for you? I mean, I know that's a lot, and thanks for bearing with me, but it was really deflating. Like, it was deflating in one sense, like, oh my God, look at the implications of this. Like, you think of national level, like juries and, presidents. Like, if we get it wrong at that level, you think we're going to get it wrong with our youth team? Yeah, we are.
Yes, our emotions can be very powerful, especially when it comes to our memories, and just how much we retain those. I think where I would take this is for those who can't afford a camera, or getting a camera in and videotaping everything just isn't plausible. And I've never necessarily thought about it in this way, but for me, I've never been a big post game conversation guy. Certainly not about the game. Now, if there was a certain thing in terms of how we acted towards a referee, towards an opponent, that's one thing, right? That does need to be immediately addressed. But in terms of strategy, in terms of technique, in terms of the actual game, I share very little. Most of the time, it's get everyone in. Hey, great job today. Appreciate all your effort. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you on Tuesday. That's about it. That's my post game talk. Now, most of that comes from players just played. They're exhausted. They're probably thinking about the date they have later, or the schoolwork that they have to do when they get home, or the fact that they're going to some theme park afterwards, whatever it may be. So they're probably not really focused on it. That's kind of where it stemmed from. They don't want to hear it at that point in time. That's what we have practice for. But hearing this, I think it adds another layer to it of you as a coach don't know. You may not be reliable in what you're saying, right? It just happened, but based on whether you won or you lost, that emotion can affect what you're remembering in the game. It can actually lead you down the wrong path, right? You start practicing working on the wrong things. I think it's more important when you go into a game, especially to really focus on just very few things and gauge your progress in those few things. If you don't have a camera with that's to keep your mind kind of focused and paying attention to the right things and make sure you're leading your team on the right way. I think it's important to narrow your scope.
Yeah. And I want to get practical on one thing here. So how do you overcome memory distortions? We mentioned video. Great way. The scorebook. Telling that narrative as accurately and objectively as possible. That's why I said journalists, right? Journalists stick to the facts. Who, where, when, why, and how, or wherefore. But memory distortions. So memory distortions are going to occur. So this is what Leonard says in here. It says, in constructing your memory, however, there's some pieces. There is what you said, but there is also what you communicated, and what other participants in the process interpreted as your message, because communication is never as clear as the communicator thinks. And finally, what they recalled about those interpretations. It's quite a chain, right? And so people often strongly disagree with their own recollections of events. So the one that was hilarious with this, and I don't think we'll get to the whole thing, is students literally wrote down on paper what they did on 9/11. Right? This is some Florida university. And then they told it to them, they asked them like, hey, where were you? What were you doing? Like years later, maybe it was even while they're still in university. They disagree with their own written accounts, Jake. It's not even a thing. But that's why when we are having important conversations, lawyers take notes. Though this doesn't eliminate the potential for memory lapses, it does minimize it. So if I know this is I'm getting excited over something overly simplistic, but carry a notebook if you're a coach. If you're conversing with a parent after or an athlete, write their name. What did they say? Have the documentation. And some people are iPad people. I don't care how or what you take notes, but have some sort of record for your season. Mike Schilt is, I think that's how you say his name. He was the manager for the Cardinals, and I'm struggling to find it. He's the Padres manager after a few years, but I'll try and find the article, but he would actually run his player meetings with a literal, like the old school foolscap notebook. And that was such a thing that he would document that process. So what I'm trying to say is we talk about subliminal and the memory and making sure we get things accurate is document your stuff. You will forget. And it is nice whether you're in Notion, you're in Evernote, Google Doc, I don't care, paper, write it down. You will thank yourself because you can just flip back to it and see here's what happened. Because otherwise you're going to lose. I can't put it any nicer than that.
I mean, there's an element of this too, of almost emotionally manipulating people or even yourself. And I would actually say this could be a tool that you could use in a positive way. So if a player has a bad game and they're feeling pretty down about themselves, I mean, number one, it's only going to last for so long because they are going to edit out all of the bad stuff, right? That's just what our brains do, is a sense of, I would almost call it a survival mechanism. But if you can find those one or two things and just throw them at them of like, hey, I really appreciated it, or I loved how you did this today, it can change that emotional perception of the game, short and long term, right? They may not turn into sunshine and roses in terms of how they viewed it, but if you're wanting to keep an athlete, their confidence level, etc., high, you can utilize it because their brain will edit it down, and you sure as bet they'll probably remember, oh, hey, coach really liked that, okay. And it levels out that emotion, which then it sounds like will create a different memory link in their brain that hopefully is a little bit more positive. Than just letting them walk away.
Well, we need to go to high class videography in order to understand this. And that was me being totally facetious. So excuse my lack of tact. But do you remember the water boy?
Of course.
Okay. Think of the scene I'm getting at here. Because what you were just saying is like you build a case that when you're at a low moment, you can recall, hey, here's the 55 things that was a random number, 55 things we've done good up until this point. But do you remember when they're in the locker room, it's at halftime and they're just getting throttled at the end of the movie? And, he's like, remember that one time, Bobby, like they just go through all the things. Yeah, it's a great scene. This is good. This is high quality podcasting, people, like the water boy. But I'll remember that one time Bobby Bashir came back and the Mug Dogs won the bourbon ball, do you? Like, that's what I'm talking about. And that's a great scene and funny movie. I haven't seen that in God knows how long. But that's what we're talking about, is like you have the ability to be like, hey, no, look right here. And this is why it's important. Because if we know this about our subconscious and our alertness, so coming back to the theme, alertness, be alert by having a notebook, digital or physical, taking, I would say not all the video because we're not going to take all of the practice, but selective video of progress, and build the case of positive moments and accurate facts to have them when you need them, whether you're going to win the Bourbon Bowl or not. Does matter, because it could shape the flavor of how you view your entire season otherwise, right? If you just leave this to chance.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Foosball is the devil, Bobby Boucher. Okay, let's keep moving then. Maximum mannerisms. Horses, Hans, and harnessing the nonverbal. We talked about this a little bit before, and this was super interesting to me. So let's go down this horse trail, shall we?
All right, backstory. So the chapter is reading people. Your amicable words mean nothing if your body seems to be saying something different. Now, I am not a nonverbal expert, but I am aware that nonverbals tell a lot. And I think all of us could stand to be more mindful of them, or at least intentional. It's like they always say, like, hey, you know, when you have your fans folded or crossed, like we weren't allowed to cross our arms when coach was talking because he wanted us to be open. That was a rule. And I was like, that's dumb. He's like, yeah, just put your arms behind your back or at your sides. I want you to be physically open to anything I possibly say. So that is interesting. Mm-hmm. But there is this whole story about a horse, a stallion called Clever Hans, it was like a third grader, could do arithmetic and an intellectual tasks on those levels of like a third grader. And there's this whole deal whether you could actually train this horse to do this thing. And I'll save you the punchline is that the horse could pick up on the mannerisms, right? The key to the horse's intellectual feats lay in involuntary and unconscious cues displayed by the questioner. Like, what is 2 + 2? I mean, like you could kind of lead a horse to water. God, that's too punny not to use, right? Literally unconsciously leading a horse to water. And so you would have these unconscious tells, these demeanors that broadcast a clue to a person's state of mind. So the horse picked up on those. They must have been laying them on pretty thick. So Hans might not have been a racehorse, but he had the heart of a poker player. And so, you know, we could ask, like, what are our most powerful unconscious tells? You know, I mean, it's interesting if you want to take this to its logical conclusion, is think about the situations you might face as a coach. We're in March Madness as we record this. If it's tie game, end of the, you know, it's Oakland and NC State here. I mean, we're talking like they're going to overtime, 2 underdogs, Cinderella teams. You know, what are your mannerisms in those pressure situations? You know, what unconscious mannerisms are you displaying towards your team, and how are they receiving them, right? And I'm not saying which ones should you do. I'm not getting into that in this. But I want to read this. As anyone who has ever been on the receiving end of a fellow driver's display of a middle finger knows, nonverbal communication is sometimes quite obvious and conscious. But then there are times when a significant other says, "Don't look at me like that." And you respond, "Don't look at you like what?" Knowing full well the nature of the feeling you were sure you had hidden. Or you might smack your lips and proclaim that your spouse's scalp and cheddar casserole is yummy, but somehow still didn't elicit the response, "What don't you like?" Or excuse me, "What, you don't like it?" Don't fret. If a horse can read you, why not your spouse? So when we talk about maximum mannerisms, and that was just a alliterative fun, it's the gestures we make, the position in which we hold our bodies, the expressions we wear on our faces, and the nonverbal qualities of our speech all contribute to how others view us. And so what I wrote down is we must practice these. And I'm not saying have this laundry list of mannerisms, but the idea that, you know, you think of, and it's funny, you think of like politicians, it's an election year, all the little stupid hand motions they do, you know, you're good at them. Like, you're like, thank you. If you're not watching, Jake's on point. He's slicing the watermelon, got the okay sign. Probably offending somebody in sign language, but it's still funny.
Oh, man.
So tell me about mannerisms. I know you and I are both a fan of Brad Stevens and some of these a little bit more cool, cold-blooded coaches that seemingly have it under control. who knows? Maybe their vibrations are saying something different. But tell me
Well,
about
no, I
mannerisms.
appreciate you, Brad, bringing up Brad Stevens. I'll cut to him first. You know, having YouTube Shorts has been a really cool resource of information. And one of the things I enjoy listening to on YouTube Shorts are these ex-military guys who will go on these podcasts and you get snippets of them, right? And I've seen the question asked many times, because we're talking, you're talking SEAL Team 6, you're talking Green Berets, like you're talking the most elite people on planet Earth who would seem to be all leaders. And so when you ask these type of people, like, what do you look for in a leader? Why? What was the best leader that you ever had and why? And I would say, from what I recollect, again, memory can be a silly thing, but they often talk about how it didn't matter the situation. He never lost his cool, or she never lost her cool. She was always in the present moment for us, always in the present moment for us, and was always reliable. Like, no matter the situation, they were unfazed. They were just boom, locked in. We knew exactly what was going to happen. And having that kind of emotional reliability was the most important thing for us. And that made me think of Brad Stevens in the sports world, right? It could be 2 minutes left. Butler, who's never been there before in their lives, no one ever envisioned Butler being in a Final Four, much less a national championship game. In a game, 2 minutes left, and you look at Brad Stevens and he's like leaning up against the score table with a smirk on his face. Just kind of like looking around, like, no, don't you understand the moment that you're in? Yeah, it's a game. It's the same moment that I was in the first game of the season. Because we're going to do the thing. We're doing things exactly the same as we would then. Nothing has changed, right? It's the old Hoosiers analogy of how far is the free throw line from the basket? How tall is the basket? You'll find the dimensions to be the exact same as they are on the Jim and Hickory. It's the exact, exuding that similar, same type of environment from a coach is so important. That's what it made me think of.
Well, and I want to be clear on this. I think this is an N of one. Echo me here, agree or disagree with me. I think we should tell our players what our mannerisms, our gestures, and our things say, like ahead of time. Like, I think they could subliminally and unconsciously pick up on it. I don't want to leave a lot of that to chance. So, you think of baseball coaches, we got all the cool signs, like this is the indicator, for a thing after that means this, like it's a whole language, right? And some are more complicated than others, but you're looking for those signals, and that's an intentional language system. But you think of like American Sign Language and just even breathing, like to be able to calm yourself, self-regulation should come up in Alertness here. I think we'll get to that in the next couple books, but the one I wanted to say is, like, I did this. I was a third base coach for the softball team, and I'm doing this. You know what I'm trying to say? I told them to their faces. One girl's like, "What does this mean, coach?" Like across the field in front of everybody, "Coach, what do you want?" "I want you to steal." You should say it to everybody. "When she throws, I want you to go to second base." Like, I had to say it out loud. And thank you for laughing. It was so funny. Like, "Coach, I don't know what this." Like, she's just like shaking her head, like doing it back to me. I'm like, we don't have a stealing sign. She's not going to throw you out. Like, obvious, go. And then I get to the, everybody, I don't need to give you a signal. Just steal until you get and hang out with me, and I'll high five you at third. I expect you to steal on the first pitch. What are you waiting for? Yeah. So, not that you, again, need a huge list of things, but I mean, this is, again, who has time for this? But I want the kids to know whether winning or losing, like, even not necessarily always positive emotion. Like, if I am frustrated, this happens, but to have the awareness and the preparation of that, because you're going to come across these scenarios over and over, right? Like, when is coach dissatisfied? Why would I be dissatisfied? Because our effort is low. If I stop talking, let's just say maybe we'll get to the whole talking thing. You're a talker, right? You talk a lot. You're animated. You're a charismatic individual. If you drop away from that, you're saying, "Hey, I'm not providing the energy I usually do," it's because your effort's not there. And if you're not putting in, I'm not putting in. And I can't talk my way and motivate you to not putting in the effort. And so if you notice me, I want you to notice that you need to ramp it up. And it shouldn't be passive aggressive. Don't get me wrong. I want to be more proactive. So
Yeah.
mannerisms.
So I mean, I've had plenty of run-ins with this. I'm a coach that when a game happens, you will see me sitting on the sideline. Very little. The game is for the kids. It's not for me. They don't need to hear me. They don't want to hear me. I have practice for that. They hear me plenty during practice. I'm going to give them the game. Okay. So throughout my years of coaching, I've had multiple parents, right? See me sit on the sideline and assume that I don't care, assume that I'm not doing anything, assuming that I'm just a crappy coach because I just am sitting there, right? I mean, never mind when kids will come off and I'll sub them off, right? That's when I'll usually take a time to make a comment. Sometimes, most times, I don't say anything to them because they just want to play the game. And so I've had a lot of people interpret that in a very negative way. Now, thankfully, in those situations, I'm aware enough of why I'm doing it, and I'm a firm believer in why I'm doing it and the results that it produces. I'm going to continue to do it. Now, that being said, I have noticed because I do get so casual on sidelines. You talk about your arms crossed, like I will lean back in my chair. I just have my arm crossed watching the game. I am enjoying the game, right? And this actually came from my wife. She's like, you look so miserable over there. I'm just enjoying the game. I don't like what do you want from me? But I took it enough to be like, okay, well, I can't just like lean back and cross my arms. That might be a little bit too much. So I am very aware of at least sitting up, and giving off the vibe, the interpretation that I'm more intensely into the game, even though from my perspective, whether I'm leaning back, whether I'm sitting up, I'm paying the exact same amount of attention to the game and da 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 da. So I am very aware that you are constantly being read, and you're constantly, well, I should say, some constantly read others and some don't. So a big way that I see this happen is when I'm coaching kids, if they're getting a little squirrely and like I've called them in and we're all in, but they just keep talking, I will essentially in an instant change my demeanor. And I won't yell at them, I won't scream at them, I'll just change my demeanor. And there'll usually be 2 to 3 kids right away that pick it up and start going, oh, guys, coach wants to talk. Guys, stop. Guys, stop. Coach wants to talk. And then there's always like 2 or 3 that just don't. They'll just continue to talk and continue to find something to goof off about and continue to go off. Da, 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 da. And then you'll just kind of sense it slowly spread. So you almost reveal the spectrum of individuals who are very alert to what's happening with the people around them.
Oh, yeah.
And then progressively the people who are less alert, but it just spreads throughout the team before eventually you get like the entire team looking at 2 kids telling them to be quiet while coach is just sitting there like my shoulders slump a little bit. And I'll just kind of start looking at them. And then I just pay attention and watch the wildfire spread. Eventually it lands on the 1 or 2 kids that just don't get it. And so that's a good way for me to tell who the kids are that are most alert to people's responsiveness, nonverbal communication. It's kind of a useful tool that I might use a little bit differently now, or in a little bit the bigger capacity. That's one big way that I see it come out.
Well, and let me get to a couple of, I want to go back to you in a second, but I would list like the most like an 80-20 thing, and I don't want to go down Pareto's law, but what are the things that occur most often in your sport, right? So you call timeout. Communicate to your team, when do you call timeouts? Is it because we're playing terrible? It can't be the only time you call timeouts, right? But I call timeouts when. So it's not like this massive shot, coach call timeout. He's now freaking out, right? Because a lot of times you don't say that, coach freaking out. We're down by 12. They went on a run. I'm calling a timeout so we can pause and you give the reasons. The other one is like when your athletes fail, they strike out. I think we should teach our athletes how to strike out and how to fail. Like it's something that happens, a mistake, right? I think so it's not fatal, right? The whole no venting policy from self-control and a no complaint world. That was a good episode, by the way. And then even how to win. Like, so like you get a hit. I love when coaches, like we do fist bumps, like, like when third base coach, high five certain guys when they hit a home run. Like, I think even that is useful in terms of mannerisms. The one I wanted to, equate to you is like, have you ever typed with somebody over your shoulder and you instantly become a worse typer? It's kind of like what it could be in a game. Like if you're overbearing in the game, that, it just breaks guys. And the encouragement I give you is just tell your parents, like during practice, I'm here to fix, I'm here to, communicate. During the game, I'm here to make space and get out of the way. And if you don't like that, if you have these expectations that the coaches should be a certain way, and maybe that's not for you, right? But I'm allowing the kids to play the game, which actually is really good practice as a soccer coach, for the record, from our industriousness days. So
yeah, no, I share it every time. I usually share it a couple times throughout the season just to let people know.
Well, and that's good. That's good.
And it's just, there's just certain people have different mentalities, right? I think sports in general has gone through psychology has gone through many changes and what a coach should act like and be like and whatever. I was turning on the NC State Oakland game, I want to say yesterday. Fairly tight game, and guy came down, threw a pass to the wing, and pass got deflected, ended up being a turnover. The amount of anger that the coach let out in a moment was just appalling to me. Like, what did that serve? You've just created fear or anger or not a positive thing in that kid that you're trying to communicate to. And then I just started laughing because he went from like this violent, angry face and fist pump to taking two steps down the sideline as his team went back on defense and like clapping and cheering them on. This is so bipolar. I don't know what to do. But talk about, trying to play into that and whether your emotions through the entire game while someone who's supposed to be your biggest advocate is all over the map. It's tough. And regardless of whether you said anything, just seeing your coach have like this angry fist pump at something you did, the receiver of that doesn't have to think, oh, coach is really mad at me. Just seeing that alone takes you back. Even if you're not the target of the anger, just seeing it alone will take you back and go, ooh.
Well, and especially if that's a figure you don't want to let down. I mean, every athlete responds differently to that based on their situation and their background and things like that too. So I think we're saying about maximum mannerism is be very aware.
Yeah.
Don't be the dummy that like you're reactive. I mean, I think that's one thing is if you can train your mannerisms, you can train your unconscious, it allows you to slow down. Yeah. You think of athletes getting in the zone. What about being in the zone as a coach? Be able to see what's happening, know where you're at in the game, and be able to respond accordingly, not unconsciously. And so, saying it matters.
But even, I guess, to take it to the next level, even when you're not reacting or doing anything, being aware that you're still a book and you're still being read. Yep.
That's like a really captivating idea. What's on your book cover?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Let's keep trucking along here. Kevin, tell us why we should only coach champions.
Oh, Jake, this hits my education heart. I think it's unethical. Okay, so I'm going to start with that. That this study came from Pygmalion in the classroom. You don't even need to know anything about Pygmalion, but you do need to know about rats, which is where all scientists start. And so what ended up happening is there is a study. Why should we only coach champions? Pretty interesting, but it's called subliminal expectations. What you expect, you get. And I know that is pithy and you probably heard it, but after this, if you are not blown away, I'd be shocked. So the first experiment, of course, started with the rats, and there was two distinct groups of humans who were told one group of rats was exceptional and the other one was not. Those who believed that their rats to be high achievers handled them more and were gentler. thereby communicating their attitude. The students attempted to act impartially, but they couldn't. They unconsciously delivered cues based on their expectations, and the rats responded. Okay, you don't even need to know what the rats were doing. It doesn't matter. So the experiment was then done on the next thing, which is humans. All right. So not only on average did the students who expected their subjects to accord high success ratings to the photos obtain such ratings, but in addition, every single student who had been led to expect high ratings obtained higher ratings from their subjects than did any of those experiencing low ratings. Somehow, they were subliminally communicating their expectations. But how? So one important way the experimenters' expectations were communicated, well, seriously, like how did this expectations get communicated? Here's how. Through inflection and tonal quality of their voices. I think moms are good at this, right? Maybe wives, spouses. You can do it, Jay. Like, I know that's being mean, but like you can hear the encouragement. I was trying to take an extreme example, but you think of like a baby just starting to walk. Think of the volume, the tone, the encouragement around that stage of life. And if you haven't started to learn to walk at some time, like observe that. It's probably one of the most pure situations of like parents wanting to will their child to walk for the first time. That's the kind of volume, mannerism, tone that we are looking. So the lesson learned has obvious implications in our personal and professional lives with regards to our family, friends, employees, and employers, and even those in a marketing group. Whether or not we wish to, we communicate our expectations to others, and they often respond by fulfilling those expectations. So we have like expectation affirmations. And this one was really, really crazy. The author says, he came out of his authorship for a second. He says, that's one of the gifts I received from my parents, to be treated like the Vasco da Gama rats, to be made to feel, thank you for laughing, to made to feel as if I could navigate my way to success in whatever I set out to do. It's not that my parents talked to me about their belief in me, but I somehow felt it. And it has always been a source of strength. The note I meant was, if you have a belief and an expectation that your kid is a champion, I don't care if they put on the shoes or the glove for the first time, that develops into this gift that eventually becomes a strength, whether it's in athletics or out of it. Rosenthal, the guy who did the study, went on to study precisely that, what expectations mean for our children. In one line of research, he showed that teachers' expectations greatly affected their students' academic performance, even when the teachers try to treat them impartially. So he asked school kids in 18 classrooms to complete an IQ test. This is what I think is unethical. The teachers, but not the students, were given the results. The researchers told the students that the test would indicate which children had an unusually high intellectual potential. Okay, I remind you, this is, I think, kindergarten. What the teachers didn't know was that the kids named as gifted, I'm doing those funny air quotes if you're just listening, named as gifted did not really score higher than average on the IQ test. They actually had average scores. Shortly afterward, the teachers rated those not labeled gifted as less curious and less interested than the gifted students, and the students' subsequent grades reflected that. But what is really shocking and sobering, I'm almost done, is the result of another IQ test given 8 months later, Jake. When you administer an IQ test a second time, you expect that each child's score will vary some. In general, about half of the children's scores should go up and half down as a result of the changes across time, right? When Rosenthal administered the second test, he indeed found that about half the kids labeled normal showed a gain in IQ. But among those who had been singled out as brilliant, as champions, he obtained a different result. About 80% had an increase of at least 10 points. What's more, about 20% of the gifted group gained 30 or more IQ points, while only 5% of the other children gained that many. Labeling children as gifted had proved to be a powerful, self-fulfilling prophecy. That branding a child a poor learner, a poor athlete, a poor whatever, will contribute to making the child exactly that. That is the case for I only coach champions. Whoa. I'm like, could you imagine? Like, that's 1 year of development, Jake, like in this school. You can imagine that over the course of an athletic career. I mean, I don't want to extrapolate these numbers, and I'm obviously excited and ranting, but holy cow, like I'm guilty of this. Like I've looked at my group and said, for God's sakes, like you just put your hand, you're not Ty Cobb, put your hands together. And they don't understand my reference, so that doesn't help me. But I guarantee I unconsciously, subliminally do not put a champion mindset on that kid just because it was the first time at practice. And shame on me, you know? So I will be the first one to throw my own stones at my own glass house. But how do you respond to I only coach champions and this gift of subliminal expectations?
Yeah, if you're listening right now, you need to take inventory of how this happens, right? And we don't even realize it. Just take a simple thing of you make a team, right? You have tryouts, you make a team. You rank everyone on that team. On day one, you rank everyone on that team. You have your top 5 and your bottom 5. You right now just created a situation where you will probably treat the top 5 differently than you treat the bottom 5. It's like, well, we should, because they're at a different level. Well, maybe in terms of what you're specifically teaching them, but your attitude towards them will change. It has changed already, right? And it won't take long. And you'll be 2 months into the season, like, we win a lot more games. If I could just swap out the bottom 3 for this other 3, we'd probably win more games. You're going to be treating them different. Okay. God, the amount of ways that we do this or send this messaging to kids is insane. Just tryouts and forming 3 teams does that. I don't think people realize this. Just doing that, you've pegged them into a section. You've probably given them the less qualified coach, and you have them run an entire season. Where's the opportunity for growth? Is it the same as the group in front of them? And I'm not talking we're doing this with 16-year-olds. We do this with 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds. Okay? Do you know the growth and development they all have, and you're begging them right? This is just silliness. This is why I'll always be a proponent of younger ages should all practice together. You don't yes, you have to make teams because you can't bring 45 kids to a tournament. I understand that, right? But you have them all practice together, and you're all practicing at the same level, the same intensity, the same. If you can't hang, then you're in the wrong program. Okay. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you need to learn how to hang. This is how we do things. Whether you're on the top team, the third, whatever, this is how we do things. Then you go to tournaments, and now we'll split them up, but it's never the same. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll probably have the top 5 always be the same, but then you'll have these bubble players that are going to be going, nope, you're going to this team today. Nope, you're going to that team today. Right? Oh, coach, you're sending me that. No. Go be the best player on that team for a little. Why are you? You're 8. Go be the best player on this team. Go feel what it feels like to be the best player on the team. And then next week, we're going to jump up and let's see how your mentality changes. Yep. Because if you go with this group of players and you're like, yeah, I am the champion, right? I'm the Kobe Bryant. And then I've sent you to the next group and all of a sudden you're acting like Mark Madsen. Why the vast change in, okay, yeah, you might not be as good of a player as what, but your mentality now has changed. Your expectation of yourself is no longer a champion. And you're like, I'm just this. Okay. Like, no, go take the same mentality. But yeah, this is, if you're listening right now, take an inventory and really, really be alert to where this type of information gets sent out to kids, because it happens all of this in time. We pigeonhole kids so early and so often.
I'm really like taken aback. It's probably why I'm so charged right now. I gotta really ask you a sobering question. I'm stealing a little bit of language from that passage I read. Whether this is possible, because I don't know if it is, and I need you to kind of verify if this is true. I have a probably rosier thought that you can communicate. There's 2 tiers. We're talking about what lasts in athletics, right? High expectations. Great. Most people know that. If you're in education, you're a teacher, coach, You know that having high expectations matters. But what I'm going to ask you is this definition of a champion. When we're talking athletics, we're thinking the sport. Can we communicate our expectations as you're a champion as a person over who you are as an athlete? Is like, and I don't want to like I know that like, yeah, we're going to do that. No, can we realistically invest in our kids to say, I'm here for who you are beyond your identity as an athlete? When I communicate my expectations of you as a champion, I mean who you are as a person, who you're going to be one day, regardless if you're in soccer or softball. Because we talk about that, right? Well, yeah, you know, you're a wrestler, and I'm watching these national champions and, you know, all the jobs and the things that they might get. And when you hire somebody who's been in the military, you know what you're getting. Can we transcend the sport, Jake? I mean, I don't know. I mean, my obvious answer is, yeah, we can do that. We'll communicate that. I don't think that's true on the whole. Like, we're so, I don't know, dialed into our 8-year-old Kobe's that we can't look at them beyond that. Can we subliminally get underneath it and say, no matter where you're at 1 to 23, you're all champions? Not that everybody gets a participation trophy, but from an expectation standpoint, we need to, right? I don't know how to process this. This is bothering me quite a bit.
Well,
Obviously.
I mean, yeah, you have to define what a champion is. It's not just the person who gets the trophy at the very end. And I completely buy in, right? But that's where process becomes such a key point to not outcome, right? So when I say train everyone together, well, you're all going to be champions because you're all going to prepare this way. The intensity level, the competitiveness, the desire is all going to be at a high level, because that's not a character trait that's going to stop once you leave the floor, the field, whatever. That's going to transcend sports. You take a look at Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant was a champion, not because he raised trophies. It's because of how he prepared and the mentality that he had every day. The trophy was a byproduct of a championship mindset, right? And so when you talk about transcending the game, again, you have to define what a champion is, and that gets set up in a practice environment, not in a game environment. Because if you just try to set it up in a game environment, you're going to connect the trophy to the championship environment. That's not the case. Okay, the trophy is the byproduct of the champion, the environment that you create in practice. So for me, what would I focus on? Right, when we're talking, you're setting up a championship mindset in humans. I'm currently doing this with 20-something-year-olds in the professional world, right? Because it's still a case of, I don't know what I want to do, right? Because the question I'm currently going through interviews, right? And the question gets asked, what do you want to be in 5 years?
Your favorite question.
It's my least favorite question on planet Earth, right? I don't know. Richer than Jeff Bezos. I would like. What's the correct answer here? I want to be the CEO of whatever company. Like, what are we actually getting at here, right? But a lot of people spend the time of, what do I want to do? I said, well, you spend so much time asking yourself what you want to do, but do you ever ask yourself who you want to be? Because that's far more important. If who you are is who you want to be, the what you do will take care of itself. Because you are going to be content doing whatever it is you're doing. Versus if you're just chasing down what you want to do and not who you want to be, then you're chasing a aloof, materialistic idea that will never meet your expectation and will never fully satisfy you. And I guess it's different for everyone. What does that look like for everyone? For me, I want an environment that is highly competitive. I want an environment that's very intense, right? I want an environment that there is no give up. I want an environment where emotions are allowed, but they're controlled. I want an environment where how you treat the person next to you matters. How you treat the person across from you matters. Those are the type of things that I would seek to establish. And I think we can transcend sports with this type of idea.
This is interesting because if you actually start from the bottom up, Jake, I mean, I know we're going to go talk about all these other books, and we have talked about plenty of books and tools and tactics and all the things. If we held a workshop and did nothing else except define champion. No, I'm serious. You think about this. Like, I know, thank you. You're running with my humor, but like if you just sat around, you had like an 8-hour workshop, I mean, which is ridiculously long for this one topic, right? But if you spent the time and you deconstructed what is a champion, what is our unlearning we need to do here, and then you share this study and you go through as a group. Like, you think of like a high school or a college staff, like Penn State. Cal Sanderson needs no help defining what a champion is, right?
Right.
And by the way, all these guys' interviews on the wrestling were hilarious. Like they get the little announcer, they're great. If you just spent the time and said, what is a champion? You just processed the way you did. And then you acted upon that. Does it really matter what you coach after that point? I mean, you might not know a darn thing about the sport, but if you have you can do it, honey, right here, you got that. What do you don't need anything else. I mean, I don't want to dismiss every other, our entire podcast, like God dang it. But, dude, really, like if you have that subliminal, I mean, you think of the numbers that were just shared in here, and I didn't like translate those to athletics, but I don't know what else, that's why we started here in the unconscious, is if you don't got that, I mean, when you think about building a program brick by brick, you aren't building you're building like half a house instead of the whole house. You got, sure, maybe you're starting 5, but you're only as good as your weakest link to some extent.
Yep.
So, yeah, maybe we should just do that. Maybe that's our workshop. Welcome to our TED Talk. I only coach
Just mean to be a champion. No, it's so true. I laugh because we make things so much more complex than we need to. I mean, really, what's Cape? You're coaching. Why are you coaching? Right? I think all of us not all of us would say this, but the truth is we all want to win. We want to be a champion. That's why we want to do this. Okay. What does it mean to be a champion? Defining words to really set forth a vision and perspective for everybody involved. That simple. That thinking simple. And I always laugh because, in the soccer world, you get all these people with all of these certificates and licensing into a room, and they all think they're very bright, and they all get in and like, hey, what's the best practice? And it's like, okay, you got to do this for 20 minutes, and you should do that for 20 minutes, and let's call this section that, and this section that, and this is the best practice of how to run a training session, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Do you know how many variables are in that, you knuckleheads? Like, you just sat around to make yourself feel self-important. That's what we just did here, okay? And that's not a knock on you individually.
No.
I'm not saying you're there for only yourself, but that's basically what just happened, okay? Like, you're trying to force yourself to have a job outside of actually doing the coaching of the kids. If you're just setting an environment that's super competitive, that kids love coming to every day, you don't have to open up your mouth to say anything, and they are going to figure it out. That's why we have basketball court at every park in this country. Kids just go and they compete and they love it and they have fun. And wouldn't you know, we create the best basketball players on planet Earth, right? Yep. That is the concept. That is it. We come in and we overcomplicate it and come up with all these thoughts and ideas of just the such minute details, and it makes us forget, are they enjoying being there? Are we creating the right atmosphere for them to grow? Right? Like, okay, we followed this 4-step process, but we haven't talked at all about competitiveness, or because a lot of kids right now struggle with it from what I'm seeing. Right? Especially when they get their butt beat, man. Well, both ways, actually. When they're really good, they struggle with it. Like, I was clocking everybody. What do I do? Like, how do I challenge myself? Or am I really this great? Kind of deal. So, yeah.
And we didn't even touch. Maybe we need to move on, but you can take it if you want. I'm going to offer you the chance because I know you could rant. So go for it if you want. I mean, there is a soapbox, so go on if you want. It's a little bit of a step up, but it's fine. Is one of my first job, teacher. Said kids need to hear 3 things. I love you, I'm proud of you, and you're so good at something, right? You gotta have there gotta be something they're good at, right? And I in my day job, I get to teach about love, and I explicitly say, when we teach love languages, like some people have never heard the words "I love you" from a caring adult, right? Where I'm getting at, Jake, is what kid have you stared at? And you think of even, this is where I'm baiting you, as the parent. How many times has a kid heard you're a champion? Like, I mean, you can be like if you've won, right? I've won, you've won. I've been a champion. It's great. It's cool. Taco Choco tasted great. When has it been communicated? Like, if your coach doesn't do it, you think of like, yeah, we just talked about like we don't have to hold a workshop for anything else. What about the expectations that are communicated from parents that either have some, have none, have too much, have too little, that are all contingent upon their performance as an athlete? I got you a $400 bat. You better use it. So if you imagine, if you don't say the kid is a champion in the proper context, who's saying it? Because you're in athletics. This is the thing they want to be at. They're more than likely, I mean, just statistically, not everybody's a bookie like me and likes to read books and is into that whole academic game. This might be the only area they excel.
Yep.
They have a lot riding on this. And so if you don't tell them they're a champion beyond that, you think they're going to rise to the occasion when it's 66-66? No, they're going to put so much pressure on themselves because this is all they have. And when you don't have anywhere else to go or anything else to turn to, it's not good. Everything is on the line here. So I've seen when people are cool under pressure, it's because they have other things, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying like that you don't feel the pressure, but they need to know this. You know how freeing it would be to hear this? And I've heard high expectations from coaches. I think every coach says they have high expectations in a certain context. But take the bait if you want on the parents, but I'm getting bolder as I get older. That's funny. In that I want to communicate. This is how I operate. And I expect you as a parent, as an athlete, to view your kid this way, regardless of the results.
Yeah. I would give it. I'll just do this. I'll give a special shout out to Mr. Testman. Okay. I don't know if you got this so much. I played soccer with Derek, and it was his dad. Every time I saw him, and this isn't just me, this was kind of our friend group, or I mean, I don't know if I'll let you speak to it, but every time I saw him, or we do like group training together, so he'd be the one picking up the kids, whatever. You'd get in the car, or you'd see him, and he'd greet you this way every time. Hey, winner. He'd call you a winner, but it wasn't like this monotone thing. It was like this excited voice of, you felt like a winner. Like just him saying that, like, oh, I'm a winner today. Oh, sweet. Okay. Like this adult thinks I'm a winner. Like, oh, well, fun. And it seemed silly, and I'm sure to some people would be like, oh, that's kind of cheesy. What are you doing? Well, here I am, 30+ old self. I still remember when he greeted me that way when I was 9. And it wasn't because I was winning soccer tournaments. It wasn't because I was scoring goals. That's just how he viewed us. Like that's, hey, winner. Well, hey, it would instantly pop you up, right? Looking at kids, looking at the people around you that way, talking about setting expectations, just subconsciously, subliminally, right? I felt like a winner hearing it. Mm-hmm. That seems to be 3/4 to 5/6 of the battle based on the study that you just read. So that is where I would take that, right? Parents, see your kid that way. Greet them that way. Hey, champ, right? We have that, right? Champion, hey, champ. You know, hey, winner. Like, this may sound kind of cheesy, but once you start viewing them that way, that's what will come out more naturally. And they will feel it and they will respond to that expectation and how they're seen.
Yeah, the one thing, like you always talk about, and I don't need to respond to that because I've heard of the terms of endearment science and things like that. And there are people who, call their kid champs on purpose, and it's actually a thing. But I still think subliminally you can't fake that. Like there is no, I literally view you as this. The one thing I really, other thing similar to the champion concept of our, future conference of just defining that word is like hanging your hat on something. If the people around you, and it could be at any level. It's something I've been thinking about as we continue onward, is if the people around you are just, they almost baffled by you. Like you have so much belief in them and almost frustration if they don't achieve their best. It's like, if you believe in them, like everybody needs that person that believes in them so much more than is probably even realistically possible. You need to look at your kids like they do walk on water. Because you know what? When your kid walks for the first time, it is like walking on water. It's the coolest thing, right? And they're little and they're mini and they look cute. So that helps too. But if we don't look at people like they can walk on water, who will, right? And I don't want to get too emotional. I'm not the emotional guy between the two of us, for the record. But I'm serious. Like, I want to believe in people so much that is almost overwhelming. And if that's not love, I don't know what it is. So forget it.
And you have to be alert to it. This is something that you have to train and practice. I would say this. We kind of talked. We opened up. I don't know if we were on camera yet. But this, you can't fake it. And you can have an understanding of it. But when you truly have knowledge of it and when you truly see people this way, of this expectation that they are a champion and expectation that they are a winner, expectation that they are going to succeed and be fruitful, it just exudes out of your personality, right? Like everything you do, every interaction you have, when you truly believe that this person that you are interacting with is so much more than they think or that they know, it just flows out of you, right? And so it's something that takes practice. It's something that takes meditation. It's something that takes a real conscious focus on. But I hope that we can get to a point where lots and lots of coaches, lots of teachers, lots of adults, when they're interacting with kids, see them this way, so that kids are constantly feeling that positive expectation of them everywhere they go.
And I'm okay with the awkwardness of this. Just literally just let it sit. Like, don't, it goes in one ear out the other sometimes, but I believe in you. Like, I almost want to call it, maybe there's somebody who wrote maybe we'll get into it when we get into the conscious mind, but like conscious conviction. I think the thing that I'm amused by Shark Tank and pitches and entrepreneurship is they always talk about product founder fit, right? The person who made the thing or, created the business or the product. I think something deep down, like the good ones that are vetting people, I'm not saying whether they succeed or not with that particular product, but eventually they succeed, is you can't fake conviction.
Yeah.
It's there. It's in the loins. You got to draw it up from down deep. Thank you. Conscious conviction is, and it's not for everything, right? But choose your convictions wisely. So, all right, we exhausted that one. That was pretty good.
Yeah. All right. Let's grab one more topic before we wrap up here. Pay to play, establishing in-group dynamics. I find this one interesting because there is a lot of conversation about paying to play in soccer, the soccer community. So I'm curious what the book has to say.
All right. Okay, so pay to play, establishing what's called in-group dynamics. All right, we live in a very polarizing world of binary left, right, blue, red, Packers, Vikings, pick your binary rivalry, okay? And this is scientific in terms of what we call in-groups and out-groups. Scientists call any group that people feel part of an in-group. Super fancy, right? In-group. And any group that excludes them as an out-group. As opposed to the colloquial usage, the terms in-group and out-group in this technical sense refer not to the popularity of those in the groups, but simply to an us-them distinction, right? I'm in this space, whether I'm in the hierarchy or not. It is an important distinction because we think differently. Why is it important? Because we think differently about members of groups we are part of than those in groups we are not a part of, automatically. And you can, it's obvious. You treat the people that you're in the in group way better than you do the out group, right? Insiders, outsiders. It's a good book too, The Outsiders. Are you a social or are you a greaser? We all belong to many in-groups. As a result, our self-identification shifts from situation to situation, right? Work, home, family. Both experimental and field studies have found, in fact, that people will make large financial sacrifices, Jake, to help establish a feeling of belonging to an in-group they aspire to be a part of. You will pay to play. We pay for the brands. You can think of cars or fashion to signal to others that I'm a part of this group. It should not come as a surprise to anybody. The views of others in the group seep into our thinking and color the way we perceive the world. Psychologists call these group norms. That's what you were defining with champions, right? That's why pick a culture that you like, Jake, right? In a sport, that team has a flavor of what, right? So that type of thinking, like we are the All Blacks, we are the San Antonio Spurs, we're the Minnesota Twins. What does that mean? That mindset seeps into our own thinking. So the real kicker here is coming through. You would think vision would arise through an objective process. A group norm can affect something as basic as the way you perceive a point of light. It's like unreal what buttes allow us to do. I'm going to continue on. An interesting phenomenon occurred. People in a given group would call out different numbers, some high and some low, but eventually their estimates would converge to within a narrow range, the norm for that group of 3. Although the norm varied widely from group to group, within each group, the members came upon to agree upon a norm, which they arrived at without discussion and prompting. So they do like this number game, and they didn't even interact. And just the fact that they were operating from the same in-group mentality allowed them to answer these seemingly random questions the same. That's unbelievable. Wow. Moreover, when individual group members were invited back a week later, they replicated the estimates arrived at by the group. And remember, the group didn't make those estimates ahead of time. Continuing onward, our subliminal selves tend to like our fellow in-group members more. Shocker, right? In one study, researchers asked subjects to rate the likability of doctors, lawyers, waiters, and hairdressers on a scale of 1 to 100. The twist was every subject in this experiment was him or herself either a doctor, lawyer, waiter, or hairdresser. The results were very consistent. Those in the 3 of the 4 professions rated the members of the other professions as average, with a likability of about 50. But they rated as those of their own profession significantly higher, around 70. Okay, so you're talking about teamwork. We talked about teamwork before, right? And these other things about friendship. I'll say it's friendship was the thing that we were really after. We generally have this built-in tendency to prefer those in our in-group, just by default. Studies show that common in-group membership can even trump negative personal attributes. So, Jake, if we're in the same group and I actually don't like you as a person, let's say, just the fact that we're in the same in-group reduces that. The researcher put one may like people as group members even as one dislikes them as individual persons. So we talked before, does it help to have friendship on a team? Yes. Do you need it? Not necessarily if they think they're on the same team. Okay. This finding that we find people more likable merely because we are associated with them in some way is fascinating. Now, the question that I posed to Jake before this was, well, how do you signal this? Like, is there like a minimum requirement to establish in-group dynamics, right? You're going to say, oh, well, automatically we're high school football players. It's like, let's get to that. So here's the thing. Your in-group identity influences the way you judge people, but it also influences the way you feel about yourself, the way you behave, and sometimes even your performance. So we got to be really careful and explicit about this. The researchers in another study pointed out that messages that condemn yet highlight undesired social norms are common and that they invite counterproductive results. We got to be very careful with what it means to define your culture. So I'm speaking to your culture, advocacy. So what is the in-group requirements? Over the years, curious psychologists have tried to determine the minimal requirements, right? What do we have in common? Necessary for a person to feel kinship or a friendship or a teamship, whatever, with an in-group. They have found that is no minimal requirement. It is not necessary for you to share any attitudes or traits with your fellow group members, or even for you to have met the other group members. You don't even have to meet them, Jake. Like if I met Twins fans in, I don't know, I'm in DC right now as I record this, I would be like, yep, we're good. Right?
Yep.
You think about that.
Yep.
It is a simple act of knowing that you belong to a group that triggers your in-group affinity. And the last thing, we don't even need to touch on that. So when you talk about pay to play, establishing in-group requirements, defining that you're a group of champions. We're just going to continue that conversation. You adopt that you like the people in that group more. You like kind of do the Harley Davidson like motorcycle wave when you see them in public. Like you notice that they're a champion, they're a Twins fan, they're a this. That's why these signals, we're not going to get to it, about appearance matter. When you wear a Yankees hat, it is not just a baseball hat. It comes with the tradition, the class, the expectation we are going to win a championship every year. So when I see that hat, I want to throw up in my mouth a little bit. But I understand what that's doing subliminally. And when people see that, they become a part of that group. And you could automatically like a person across the room at a party you've never met just by seeing that signal. Now you might be thrown for a loop and they're just wearing a hat because they think it's cool looking. But if they're actually a blank fan or that thing, those messages matter. That's why Nike, Under Armour, all these they have their slogans and their things that when you are, if you're wearing Nike, you're an athlete. You got a body, you're an athlete. They're establishing these dynamics. And what I'm trying to say is based on our touch, our clothing, the way we talk, smile, all of these things are controllable unconsciously or consciously to, you don't in theory, what I'm trying to say as I finish is if you control these consciously and say, I'm going to send the signals through blank, dress, how I talk, you're going to unconsciously get the benefits without even telling them. It could be like you at a game. If you set the conditions consciously of champions or whatever traits you want, and it becomes a part of that group and that team, you don't need to consciously teach them that. They're going to do it unconsciously, which is a little bit manipulative, but we're learning about what lasts. You got to start sending the right signals. Don't let just random signals permeate. There's a good fun word. Permeate your team, permeate you, permeate anything. So that's pay to play. There's really not a lot you have to do.
Is it pretty easy then to get buy-in and unity?
I think as long as from what I gathered, as long as there's an other, there has to be this other thing. Like we are champion. So if you don't have a compare and contrast, I think it's harder. And I don't like to do comparisons, but in our group, just alluding to there's an other group, not to say you're better than, because I'm very wary of that. But the brown eyes versus blue eyes kind of thing, that famous study about the kids who had brown eyes were better than the kids with blue eyes, that brought in buy-in, and they had friendships break because of that study. That's one of the saddest things I've ever seen. It's almost as bad as the Pygmalion in the classroom. I think so. It's a really good question. I don't know.
So
I assume so.
One of the best ways to create unity, would you say, is choosing who your enemy is?
Let me go here, just to figure this out. In fact, so another place, it doesn't take much to establish grounds for group discrimination. It takes less than we think to erase those grounds. So let me go to the flip side. So let's just say you do have animosity between two groups, which they did this study with these kids. It's kind of like Lord of the Flies, where they're at like this cabin and they called one group the Eagles and the Rattlers. And one group did something mean to the other group, like burned their flag. Another group ransacked the cabin. So now they're one-upping each other, kind of like warfare.
Mm-hmm.
In the Robbers Cave experiment. So the sheriff noted that mere contact between eagles and rattlers did not reduce. So a contact with your other or your enemy doesn't change your attitude toward that group. So if I go hang around a bunch of Packers fans and live in Wisconsin for a couple of years, not that I did, but maybe I didn't change my mindset on them. But another tactic did. He set up a series of difficulties that the groups had to work together to overcome. So if you then come together as a group and you work together for a shared common cause, that breaks the in-group dynamics. I know it doesn't answer your question, but it was having this common goal that advantages, to work together. So like if you two both have a common enemy, then it's interesting. That doesn't answer your question to a T, but it goes to another angle.
So in would you say that in order to establish a culture, it's important to provide an anti-culture? Meaning an example of an anti-culture, this is what we don't want to be, or this is who we don't want to be?
I would say a not to-do list is highly underrated. Yeah, I know it's as easy as like, well, get good grades, don't get bad grades. Those are outcomes. But if you're talking about process, I think you would say things that are not tolerated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how. I agree. I think it would be better to have I wrote about it, the anti-athlete, when I was, studying alertness here, and we're going to get to it, but wouldn't talk a lot about what not to do. You can learn a lot by watching, kind of in the Yogi Berra sense. So I think if you're looking at that, I would actually start with what not to do before what's not a champion.
Sure.
Allows you to answer what is a lot quicker.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think there's a lot of case studies of this, right? If you think about the great rivalries in sports, what makes it such great rivalries is because the two bases are so ingrained and have such passion for their groups. So I think in North Carolina and Duke, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're each stronger because of each other, right? Because they basically like, yeah, I don't want to have any association with the other. So they ingrain themselves more in their own culture and their own group. You can take the same thing with the Yankees and Red Sox. I think you can take it to even a bigger scale, right? We're divided in this country in a lot of different lines, right? But if you look at movies like Independence Day, okay, there almost always has been war, right? People going to war against each other. Well, if an alien invasion came and we all of a sudden had this enemy that we all were going against, all of a sudden there's unity because there's a common enemy, right? In my lifetime, one of the most unifying things that has happened in the United States of America was 9/11, because all of a sudden this enemy came that we all shared.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So this is funny. He mentioned that exact. He said New York is called a melting pot in this context of 9/11, but the different elements tossed into a pot often don't melt or even blend very well with one another. This city is perhaps more like a stew made of diverse ingredients. All those divisions seem to evaporate, and people began to help people regardless of who they were. For a few months, at least, we were all first and foremost New Yorkers.
Yeah.
So I agree with that, and that's why I probably was so charged about the champions as people, because it breaks down any of those garbage in division, like top 5 players, coaches, kids. It's like, I'm invested in you. And I've seen this, like, where, no matter where you're at in the talent spectrum, there is not champion work ethic sometimes. I've seen it maybe with like the 8th kid. And I'm drawn to those kids, like 4. It's like, it's not there now, but in time it might be. And you want to develop that, because sometimes it's easy if you can just coast and you're just good, relying on talent alone. But having that, yeah, like you said, it does make both things stronger. And having an other, I would hesitate to do it against the neighboring town. We're not this. I don't think that is recommended. I do think having an anti is, and it's not for everybody. If you're in this group and you violate group expectations, violate's a strong word, break group expectations, is not okay.
Yeah.
And you might fall against those expectations because they're high. But we're going to pick you up. If you're going to be in here and you're willing to stay and you're willing to hang, and we're going to help you get there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Sorry, I kind of took this a different route. I was the anti-culture, the opposite of what we want to be, really stood out to me, right? A culture can be very unifying when it picks its enemies correctly and wisely. And we've talked about, maybe we shouldn't have, but we've talked about more people groups as being an quote unquote enemy or adversary. But you can also take ideas too, right? I think that's maybe what we probably should have spent more time on. But and if you're trying to build a culture of being a champion, right? What do we have to stay away from? Like, what's the enemy of that, right? Complacency, laziness, whatever the words you want to use. And then highlight, I mean, to steal something from past episodes, maybe you create a fake supervillain with certain characteristics that you're warring against or that you're battling, right? So it doesn't have to be necessarily a people group or the next time over, but it can be, Captain Lazy Pants. Or whatever, right? But creating kind of an object of
don't do that. Let's go to the extreme. Like, what wasn't the movie? I never saw it as and I don't want to make light of this word, so don't get me wrong. But the movie, I'm referencing the movie. Here's my preface. Like the bad guys, like the movie, the bad guys with like the wolf and stuff. Like they have a lineup, and that's a good movie. It's actually really interesting. The spin is also interesting, but like the Suicide Squad, multiple villains. Right, the villainous 6, I think, is or whatever in the Despicable Me series, the Minions thing. But even a lineup, like a roster, it's like, okay, what would be the opponents that beat us? And I love this idea concept, because then you can, once you label it and you have your own internal language and labels, you can start to spot it. What might get in the way of us achieving X? But think of that. I mean, who does that, Jay? I mean, it'd help if they're a little older, but I think even younger kids could get this if it's playful. Even let's go back, like having that poster. Just draw a little triangle with a circle on top, label thing, put a little quotes on it, maybe in a little frowny face or a mean face. Like, remember Boo and Monsters Inc.? Like that, oh, Randall's your monster. I think people could do this naturally, and it takes such think of that shift. I mean, we're kind of bypassing that shift, the shift away from the game, like the game itself, to this other thing. You're operating at a completely different level, and I'm not trying to be like, I don't know, like highfalutin or like superior, but it is superior. You're operating on a higher plane of expectations and goals and really things that are beyond whether you get that participation trophy at the end of the season. And that's something that is so rare that it becomes almost mandatory to have. Like, there's no competition in this. You be the one person that communicates expectations of champions and comes through in your conviction of your voice, and then you have the Suicide Squad of the anti-champions. Golly, that's cool. I got to work on this. I got homework is what I'm trying to say.
I love it. All right. Well, why
Any
don't we
final
go ahead and wrap
Brett?
up and get the most valuable idea and highlights? What you got?
The one thing that we didn't get to that I would say was one of my most valuable is there are these unconscious things that we don't always know. And I think a part of alertness and studying alertness in Wooden Sense is becoming aware of the things that do make a difference, both good and bad, in our teams and our coaching and our just who we are as people. I was really curious, one highlight that I will add, and I'll leave it to you as well. Two of them actually is one is just smiling. I don't see a lot of people smile. It's such an easy thing to do. I know it can be in the creepiest one, but it's like really is the currency or GDP of coaching. Just be happy to be there. It's a sport. Good grief. The other one is just the EQ. Like your popularity for kindergartners really depends on your ability to read others. And I don't score very high in this naturally, so I have to practice at it. But I would choose captains based on how good they are at reading others. It might not even be the best player. I don't even think it should be the best player lots of times. So yeah, be aware of your unconscious actions, mannerisms, be more intentional with those and capture all of the things. Build the case like the water boy. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I'd say we're all a book and we're all being read. And sometimes the way we intend to be read isn't how we're being read, right? And the only way you know that is by awareness. So taking inventory of your actions, taking inventory of your mannerisms, how you're sitting on a sideline, right? Why are you doing it? Why are you sitting the way you're sitting, or why are you acting the way you're acting? You should have a reason for it, because it has consequences on the people around you. All those things are being interpreted. They're constantly being processed. Even when people don't know that they're processing them, it's still happening. So being aware of all that is you, right? And then trying to learn how to read others, right? And pick up what other people are giving off on kind of a subconscious level, right? Is a key, right? Emotional intelligence is a wonderful tool that can be used in creating relationships with people and help training them into the people that they're supposed to be. So that's the big thing for me. There's just so much stuff that we don't even realize that we do, and the more awareness that you can have around it, the more you can utilize who you're created to be to impact the people around you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's well said. So we covered memory distortions, maximizing mannerisms, coaching champions, paying to play, establishing in-group dynamics, and way, way more. Go watch The Water Boy, get a notebook. Work on your terms of endearment and the anti-champions. So this was number 1, Alertness by Leonard Mlodinow, as I think is how you say it. We're going to be continuing on. We're going to move into the conscious coming up. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on present moment awareness and presence before putting all those things together and being able to read other people through an FBI. I think it's an FBI or CIA guy. What is everybody is saying? And we'll put all those 4 books together in the final book, in The Biggest Bluff by Maria Konnikova, in The Biggest Bluff and in poker. So it's all going to be pretty interesting in Alertness. This is going to be a sweet series. Very different from what we've seen. But thank you for listening, everybody. Yeah, remember to keep at it. Never stop learning. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Jake?
See you, everybody. No, that's awesome. Thanks. Appreciate it.